I believe that the initial thrust of the Bretton Woods arrangement was right. If we want to solve the impossible trinity, one way or another, I believe that. And we also take as a working assumption that financial markets are the most unstable markets, the most volatile, and there is an inherent instability in financial markets. Then some ways of controlling very volatile capital flows is helpful. This is why there is now a rethinking of the appropriateness of some controls on capital. If we want to give some potency to monetary policy and to have also some stability of the exchange rate, moral values do play a major role. I hear people say economics is immoral. Who cares about morality? But let's remember, Adam Smith wrote also The Theory of Moral Sentiments. I remember de Paclal, who also emphasized shame and guilt as something which can provide the cement of, in a society, the social glue. We need to get more of a moral compass. Otherwise, we will not go forward. What makes an economy tick, apart from incentives, about the distribution of resources? As I said, moral values matter. Consensus building, pride, culture and history also do matter. And also the need for catching up. We can't just say, some emerging economies, okay, keep quiet. Don't think about high economic growth rates, because otherwise carbon emission is going to be very high. But it's also true that the people in these emerging economies have to acknowledge that there is a public good, a global public good, which is we need to do something for the sake of survival of everybody. It's useless to catch up very rapidly and in 30 or 40 years' time to think about taking a shuttle and moving from planet Earth to another planet. It doesn't make sense. There are fortune reversals in history. Argentina, during the interval period in the past century, but also Finland, which had a great economic turnaround with major reforms about, I believe, 30 years ago, and turned into a remarkable society, economy-wise and an age of increasing uncertainty and diminished expectations. In my view, we're going to experience distributional struggles which may proliferate in advanced economies too. There is a winner-take-all syndrome. Just think about the financial sector, Wall Street versus Main Street. So unless corrections do take place in policy-wise, but also in the way people relate to each other, in the way the business world relates to the rest of society, into the policy-making compartment, we're going to experience major strains and tensions. In my view, there is need for a downsizing and mending of the financial sector, which is oversized, sometimes doesn't bring any value added, is overtaxing the rest, it's extracting the rent from the rest of the economy. There is a huge misallocation of resources in this respect, which has been taking place over a period of 20 years. We believe the markets can solve it. Who can? No. There is need for smart intervention on the part of the policymakers if we want to redress this imbalance in society. I believe that we're going to see a spreading of the Kriegswirtschaft, the war economy syndrome, which is going to affect both emerging but also advanced economies. There is no time to use referenda or to go through the democratic process. And the big threat here is in the liberal democracies to bring about an erosion of the core values of liberal democracy. In emerging economies, authoritarian temptations will get stronger and stronger. We shall see. But we already are seeing a new competition. It's not of recent vintage. It's been taking place for quite a while, but it's only now being acknowledged as the major competition in the world economy between liberal democracy as a type of capitalism and authoritarian capitalism. This is a model competition. It's a new geopolitical reality. It's a struggle over control of exhaustible resources. It's an irony of history because global imbalances over the last couple of decades have helped China grow. This is an irony. And, yeah. And also, I would emphasize also this preach versus practice. I think that Mahbubani is very much right. Sure, when he says, practice what you preach, because the next time we're not going to believe you. So there are also limits of openness, as in the view of my presentation. I believe that there are objective limits of openness, which are linked with rational decision-making when it comes to the economy, but also with national security concerns. If we want to say, in my view, in my modest view, a relatively open global system, so that it should not fracture, we need to acknowledge the limits of openness. Let me give you an example. Is it smart to open the capital account? Irrespective of circumstances? No, it's not. It can be very, very deleterious to the economy. So, and I can give you other examples. There are huge externalities in the world economies. They have to be acknowledged by the heavyweights. Because the heavyweights, when they do not make the right decisions, they bring a lot of damage to the rest of the world. The world is not, as Tom Friedman says, it's not flat in many respects, but it can be better by appropriate policy. It's never going to be flat, as Tom Friedman has said. Thank you.
Professor Diana, thank you for that eloquent plea, which I took to be a plea for, among other things, much better managed globalization. Those of you who are intrigued by Professor Dianu's talk will be pleased to know that he's recently published a book with the same title as the talk, Which Way Goes Capitalism, available from CEU Press. And I know that I'm going to be wanting to read that book. Our next speaker is Devesh Kapoor. Devesh is the director of the Center for Advanced Study of India at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm also pleased to say that he's a non-resident fellow and a colleague of mine at the Center for Global Development. He's the author of a number of important books, including the monumental 2-volume History of the World Bank, which is the cornerstone reference for anybody who wants to know anything about the history of the World Bank. He also published at the Center for Global Development a book with the provocative title, Give Us Your Best and Brightest, and he has a forthcoming book, Diaspora, Democracy, and Development, The Impact of International Migration from India on India, which is coming out from Princeton University Press. Devesh, over to you.
Thank you all. Most of our sort of understanding of this literature on these sort of varieties of capitalism, the sort of differing role of the state, structure of labor markets, social protections, financial systems, so on and so forth. Most of this comes from like developed countries, particularly it focuses on sort of Western Europe. So what I thought I'd do in the next 20 minutes is to explore some themes in the varieties of capitalism in two of the largest and most dynamic developing countries, which is China and so India. What's striking, of course, about these two giants is not just that they've grown so like rapidly in the past few decades. China's growth is, of course, absolutely spectacular. But that this has occurred under two very different regime types.